about 10 seconds, because if you don't see it, like just to give you a chance to see it, if you don't see it, that sucks. So.
Sounds good.
Yeah, you can be either in front or in back of the podium, whichever you're more comfortable with.
Got it. I'll be in the back today.
Okay.
Am I good to go?
I'm ready.
I'm ready whenever you guys are.
Go for it.
Now then, how many of you remember watching Sesame Street as a kid? Yeah, that's a lot of you. How many of you remember it being very sweet, warm, comforting, and sometimes educational? Now, how many of you remember it as traumatic? I see a noticeable lack of hands here, and for good reason. Children's media is actually highly controlled to make sure we don't have any incidents or outliers that scare a lot of kids. And especially now, children's programming is kind of been tamed down, especially Sesame Street. However, in the 70s, things were kind of different. Now, I won't say it was too different from nowadays, but the culture was different. See, kids these days are pretty desensitized to a lot of things due to the streamlining of information through the internet, as well as things just being kind of sucky. So it takes a lot to scare kids, but back then, things were a lot different. So what if I told you that there's an episode, 847 to be exact, that was so traumatic for hundreds of kids that it only aired once? Today, I will introduce you to episode 847, known as the Wicked Witch episode, that is now viewable today for the first time in 45 years. Now, I should establish a little bit of my background. So the reason why we have this episode is because of what is called a lost media hunt. So since this episode was taken off the air, it was kind of locked away into an archive. So lost media is essentially anything that isn't viewable to the public right now. This means it could be either locked in a collection, in a museum, or quite simply just doesn't exist anymore. So this episode specifically was archived in I believe the BBC archives, but also in the Jim Henson Foundation's archives. So it was locked away. We had no way of accessing it. So that's what makes this story just slightly more enthralling than the normal one. So I have been in what's called the lost media community for several years at this point, at least spanning back to 6th grade. I haven't really participated in many hunts. I've started a few by myself, but none of them really went that far. But that doesn't matter. However, this event is actually special to me because I watched it unfold in real time. This happened in October, so it's crazy fresh and crazy new. So now that I kind of have my little background established here, let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. In 1976, episode 847 of Sesame Street was featuring the Wicked Witch of the West, who was played by Margaret Hamilton. This episode only aired once, only to never air again for 45 years. However, with the help of legitimate and very illegitimate means, we can view it today. So all of this talk, this episode was terrifying, it was so traumatic, we couldn't see it for 45 years, doesn't mean a lot when you don't actually know what the episode is. But now is where I actually talk about what the episode is. So it's just a normal day on Sesame Street. All the Muppet guys are chilling, it's great. However, the evil Wicked Witch of the West from the Wizard of Oz flies in and drops her broom. Tragic, I know. So the Wicked Witch of the West, hoping that the Friends of Sesame Street will help her on this quest to find her broom, ultimately ends in tragedy. So the Wicked Witch of the West goes to find David, a person living on Sesame Street, to help her find her broom. However, David horribly rejects the Wicked Witch for her looks and says, "No, I will not help you find this broom." So she threatens to turn him into a flower pot. This was horrifying, I know. I winced just thinking about it to children in the 70s. So clearly, things were getting a little scary. So David's like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? There's a scary witch. And so the episode kind of progresses a little bit further from this point. The Wicked Witch was desperate to find this broom, so she starts to contact our lovely friend, Big Bird. Big Bird Man, is like, well, Wicked Witch, how can I help you today? And she's like, man, I really need my broom. And he's like, why would I help you? You're ugly and scary and a witch, and I hate you. I'm paraphrasing here. So So she cruelly, gruesomely threatens, if you don't help me find this broom, I'm gonna turn you into a feather duster. This was the final straw for these children. So the letters, as soon as this line was said, and I kid you not, this was written on the letters, this exact threat of turning Big Bird into a feather duster, letters just flew into the offices of the people broadcasting this episode. So immediately the broadcasters are like, oh my god, we need to get this off the air. So quickly all tapings and everything were just ripped off, right? So this episode was quickly shelved and an apology was announced by the broadcasters, and hoping to cool things down, it was never shown again. And things did cool down. People forgot about this episode and it went away. However, some devious fellows such as me found the episode interesting enough in order to hunt for the preservation efforts. And this is where the lost media community came in. So just because the episode didn't air again didn't mean that its memory was lost. The hunt actually started about 2 decades ago. Word was found through newspapers and newspaper clippings, so people still knew it existed. The only problem is we didn't know where. We knew it was locked in a vault, but we didn't know which vault it was locked in. So we kind of just hunted for anyone we could find, contacts, pretty much anyone who would know where it went. And eventually, we found a lead, the Jim Henson Foundation specifically. So with the Jim Henson Foundation, they issued an apology saying, no, we cannot show you this episode. It's just too tragic and too cruel to the children who were traumatized in the 70s. So we're like, okay, what do we do? And for a while, we didn't have anything we could do, right? It was just gone, except it wasn't. So the Jim Henson Foundation, despite its statement, according to Blame It On Jorge, specifically a YouTuber who covers lost media, he was invited to a private screening of the episode. And this is where things get a little fishy. He attended it, said everything was fine, everything was great. They showed the episode, it was just as perfect as everyone had expected it to be. And then something silly popped up about 2 months later. The full episode, in high quality, ripped straight from the master reel, appeared on YouTube, no source, no trace of anyone. We have no clue why this is here. We can only assume either someone had gained access to the master reel through some sort of illegal means, or someone was feeling really generous. Either way, we don't know how it got there. So that's my funny little story on this random episode just suddenly appearing on the internet. Now, you may be sitting there, okay, why should I care? So it's important because media like this, while it sounds stupid, is important because we can learn from the mistakes of it. Whether you guys like it or not, it's history, and if it's just a silly little episode, it's still important that it is preserved. So this is episode 847 of Sesame Street with the Wicked Witch of the West that you can all Google on YouTube and watch for yourself. Thank you.